Here's the recording of pages 67 to 73 in the Human Odyssey. Passing it on, the written word in ancient Sumer. Whether building ziggurats, planning next year's harvest, or preparing a temple ceremony, Sumerians found they needed efficient ways to communicate with each other. Everything could proceed much more smoothly if people could leave a written record of their ideas. Long before the time of the Sumerians, humans had learned to scratch pictures onto rocks and paint images on cave walls. It's one thing to paint pictures on cave walls, but it's quite another to put together written symbols to transmit ideas. Yet over time, that's just what the Sumerians did. They developed what archaeologists think is the world's first form of writing. By 3500 BC, Sumerian people, at least those few who could write, could leave a lasting record for their thoughts. They developed an incredibly powerful tool for organizing their ideas and expressing themselves. The ability to write and read opened civilization to all kinds of new knowledge. Let's see how the Sumerians did it. Numbers came first. The rulers and priests of Sumer had to keep track of many important things. How much land was being farmed? How much surplus grain was in the temple? How much grain should go to the workers? How should important rituals take place? The merchants of Sumer also had to keep track of their business affairs. How much grain had they sold? How much stone or copper could they buy? How much cargo did their ships hold? And then here's some words on an ancient Sumerian tablet. Described the excavation of a canal. Let's see. As civilization grew, rulers, priests, and merchants needed some place to keep all those facts and figures, besides in their own heads. So Sumerians invented symbols to represent numbers, and with those written symbols, they developed a system of arithmetic. The diagram on this page shows a few of their numerals. The Sumerians based their number system on two numerals, 1 and 10 and 60. It's easy to see why they used 10 in their numerical notation. Most people learned to count by using the 10 fingers on their two hands. Today, thousands of years after Sumerian civilization, we still rely on the number 10. We use 10 as a base for calculations when we work mathematical equations and write decimals. Because we use 10 as a base, ours is called a decimal system, from the Latin decim, which means 10. But the Sumerians chose to use 60 as their base for calculations. They had a sexagesimal system. They probably chose 60 because it's a number that can be divided evenly many different ways, which makes many calculations quite simple. Base 60 also helped in their measurement of time in circles and in astronomy. Today, even though our system of arithmetic is different from the Sumerians, we still use some of their ideas. For example, when we measure a circle, we divide its circumference into 360 degrees, 6 times 60. When measuring time, we divide hours into 60 minutes and minutes into 60 seconds. How do we know Sumerians thought about these things? Multiplication tables and square root tables etched in clay still survive. Archaeologists have even found clay tablets explaining how to solve complex mathematical equations. So here's some of the numbers, okay, and what they meant. So this is early on in their writing and then later on in their writing. The written word. Rulers, priests, and merchants of Sumer needed to more than keep track of what they bought or sold. They also needed to know which fields had been planted, which had paid tribute to the gods, or who had paid tribute to the gods, and where ships were going. To meet these and other needs, they developed the world's first system of writing. But it's not as though a scribe sat down one day and said, "Today I'm going to invent a way to write." The Sumerian system evolved much more slowly than that. It took many hundreds of years to develop. Picture writing was the first step. Sumerian scribes began to write by drawing pictures or symbols for objects such as cows, hands, feet, and stars. As time went on, some of the pictures and symbols began to stand for more than one thing. A picture of a foot might also mean stand, walk, or run. A picture of a star might mean the sky, the heavens, or a god. This way of writing was confusing since the same picture could mean many different things. It was also clumsy when it came to expressing certain words and ideas. For example, what pictures could the priest use to stand for truth, justice, or courage? Over the centuries, Sumerian writing changed. Signs began to stand for words rather than objects. Pictures changed into wedge-shaped marks. The Sumerians were able to put the wedge-shaped marks together in a series, which allowed them to write sentences as well as words. As you've learned, scholars call this wedge-shaped Sumerian writing cuneiform. One more change took place in Sumerian writing. Some of the wedge-shaped marks began to stand for sounds instead of ideas or objects. A special mark stood for each sound in the Sumerian language. So each time someone needed to write a word with a certain sound, he used the corresponding mark. This was huge progress. Now Sumerians could convey in writing whatever they could convey in speaking. So here you can see plow, and early on was this, but later it was this. A boat, first was this, and then this, a chisel, and an axe. You'll recall that cuneiform means wedge-shaped. Why were the marks left by Sumerian writers shaped that way? The answer lies in the pens the Sumerians used. They wrote by pressing reeds that were hard, sharp, and pointed into a tablet of soft clay. Each time they pressed a reed into the clay, it left a triangular wedge-shaped mark. When they finished writing, they baked the tablet in the hot sun or in an oven so it would harden. The written word is so much a part of our lives today, we almost take it for granted, which makes it hard to grasp the Sumerians' achievement in inventing a system of writing. But writing allowed rulers to make decrees and priests to record the exploits of the gods. It allowed merchants to keep track of business, make contracts, write orders, and inquire about new trade. It also made it much easier to pass knowledge along from one generation to the next. Much of what we know about Sumerian life and beliefs come from the cuneiform records they left behind. Few other inventions have done as much to propel civilization forward. All right, knowledge is power, the scribes. It was so difficult to read and write cuneiform that very few Sumerians could do it. Not even kings and priests could read and write. In fact, literacy was confined to just one class, a special group known as scribes. Scribes began life as boys in wealthy families. These chosen few went to school and learned the complex writing system with its hundreds of characters. School was tough. It went from sunup to sundown. Scribes spent long hours learning arithmetic and cuneiform, solving mathematical problems, and copying lines of text over and over. Scribes didn't just study mathematics and writing. They learned the official names of plants, animals, stones, and minerals. They memorized their civilization's great poems and copied them for future generations. Scribes became indispensable members of every palace and temple. They were the ones who kept all the records and deciphered messages from other rulers or priests. Sometimes scribes were friends and spoke frankly in their writing because they knew only other scribes would understand what they said. They wrote about their time in school together. When they sent a decree or record to another scribe, they sometimes slipped in a word or two about their ruler's mood or attitude. Tablets and cylinder seals. No matter how complex the system, writing was too important an invention for Sumerians to keep to themselves. As their trade grew, they sent more than products out of their country. They sent contracts too. Sumerian writing spread to many parts of the Middle East. Every big business deal had to be put in writing. Then the writing had to be signed by the people who were making the deal. So the Sumerians invented the cylinder seal, a device people could use to sign their names even if they did not know how to write. Cylinder seals were usually made of stone and about an inch long. As the name implies, these seals were shaped like cylinders and had a hole running through the middle so they could be worn on a pen or on a string around the neck. Every important Sumerian had his own cylinder seal, carved with a particular design. When a person had to sign his name on a tablet, he rolled his cylinder over the wet clay, leaving behind an impression. That impression became his signature. Sumerian cylinder seals made all kinds of designs when rolled across clay, from pictures of heroes and animals to prayers to the gods. And this is a cylinder seal here. And this is one that was made of the blue stone lapis lazuli. And it shows a human-headed bull and other fantastic creatures. Okay, the Sumerians used cylinder seals to stamp clay seals on storage jars and storeroom locks. That way, they'd know if anyone had opened them. Archaeologists have found thousands of Sumerian clay tablets. Most of them deal with business matters, and they've given scholars a wealth of information about the economic life of ancient Sumerians. They give us an idea of just how busy these people stayed, planting, building, and trading. A few of the tablets also contain Sumerian laws. These precious records give us insight into Sumerian ideas of justice and how they organized their society. Of biting noses, slapping faces, and paying silver. Written laws in Sumer. That's interesting. The Sumerians may have been the first people in history to record their laws. Of course, they didn't do it all at once. It took centuries to develop a set of written laws. Like the invention of writing, the development of laws was a huge step forward in progress of civilization. Laws signified that people had shared understandings of the community in which they lived. People knew what was expected of them and what would happen to them if they didn't meet their obligations. A written code of laws also made it harder for dishonest rulers to twist laws to their own ends and take advantage of others. Written laws were a great step toward fairness and justice in society. The laws of Sumer show that people were already thinking about power and how to protect the weakest among them. Some laws were intended to help those who could not always take care of themselves. Here are some examples from the later years of Sumerian civilization. A father had to support his children and the mother of his children. Slavery was legal, but slaves had certain rights. Slaves could own land, they could carry on business, they could even buy their freedom. Still, slaves were the property of their owner. They could be bought and sold. They could sometimes be severely punished at the whim of their masters. Free men could be made slaves if they failed to pay their debts. Sumerian law set down crimes for which people could be punished. They also named the punishment. By 2000 BC, the Sumerians had laws that were less harsh than the laws of some of the people who lived long after them. Many ancient societies that came after the Sumerians demanded cruel physical punishment for crimes. In Sumer, however, people could sometimes pay a fine rather than face a physical punishment. Here is one such law. If a man bites the nose of another man and harms it, he shall pay a certain amount of silver. If he harms the eye of another man, he shall pay a certain amount of silver. For a tooth, he shall pay half that amount of silver. For an ear, he shall pay half the amount of silver. If he slaps another man in the face, he shall pay 1/10 the amount of silver. From this written record of Sumer's law, we can figure out a few things about Sumerian society. For one thing, the people of Sumer seem to have had a problem with nose biting. But on the serious side, we see that in the formation of their laws, the Sumerians were dealing with difficult ideas of justice and punishment. And that is the end of the reading of pages 67 to 73.